You've got a hell of a nerve, Dominic. You think you can cage me like some stray animal? I slammed my palm onto the mahogany dining table, making the fine china rattle. I didn't care about the $200 a plate porcelain. I cared about the fact that my husband was staring at me with the cold, detached eyes of a man who had already planned my funeral. Sienna, look at yourself, Dominic said, his voice a sickeningly smooth silk. He leaned back, crossing his legs. The shouting, the trembling. Dr. Vance, would you say these are symptoms of a classic nervous breakdown? A man I'd never seen before stepped out from the shadows of the foyer, holding a leather-bound clipboard. Undoubtedly, Mr. Thorne. Severe agitation, paranoia, loss of emotional control. I let out a harsh, guttural laugh. Paranoia? You call it paranoia when my husband locks the gates, wipes my phone, and hires a doctor who looks like he bought his degree in an alleyway? Get out of my house, you hack! It's my house, Sienna, Dominic corrected, his tone sharpening. And you're upsetting Skylar, again. He pointed toward the hallway. 3-year-old Skylar was huddled against the wall, clutching a headless teddy bear. As soon as I took a step toward her, her face contorted. A blood-curdling shriek ripped from her throat. No! Stay away! Mean Mommy! Daddy! Make her stop! Skylar wailed, scrambling into Dominic's arms. The betrayal felt like a jagged blade to my ribs. I had spent months reading to her, bandaging her knees, loving her. Now, she looked at me like I was a monster from a nightmare. I looked at Dominic's smug face and realized the truth. He had been conditioning her. Every scream was a rehearsed performance. You're a sick son of a bitch, Dominic! I hissed, my voice vibrating with pure, unadulterated rage. What did you do to her? What did you tell her while I was in the shower? That I'd hurt her? That I'd kill her? I told her the truth, Dominic said, standing up. He loomed over me, but I didn't flinch. I stepped closer, our chests almost touching. I told her that her new mother is sick, very sick. Is that right? I spat. Is that why you've been mixing CNS depressants into her chocolate milk? I found the pharmacy receipt, Dominic. I know about the haloperidol. Dominic's eyes flashed with a lethal streak of malice, but his voice remained calm. Mrs. Gable, did you hear that? More delusions. My wife thinks I'm poisoning our daughter. The housekeeper, Mrs. Gable, stood by the sideboard, her hands shaking as she held a silver tray. I saw the mistress hiding pills in the pantry, Mr. Thorne. I'm so sorry, ma'am, but I have to think of the child's safety. How much did he pay you, Gable? I snapped, spinning to face her. Was it enough to sell your soul? Or does he just have photos of your son's gambling debts? Gable flinched, her silence confirming my suspicion. It was a setup, a $250 million setup. Enough, Dominic barked. Dr. Vance, the sedative, now. The doctor moved forward, a glinting syringe in his hand. My survival instinct kicked into overdrive. I grabbed a heavy crystal decanter from the table and shattered it against the edge. Step back, I snarled, holding the jagged glass toward them. I swear to God, if that needle touches me, I'll take a piece of you with me. Sienna, stop this, Dominic yelled, though a flicker of fear finally crossed his face. Make me, I challenged, my eyes burning with a fire that had been building for months. You want to play the crazy wife card? Fine. Let's see how a crazy wife handles a kidnapping arsonist husband. Because I'm not Isabella. I don't break. I burn. Grab her, Dominic commanded. I lunged, not for the doctor, but for Dominic. I wanted to see the blood. I wanted him to feel the terror he'd put into Skylar. But before I could reach him, a heavy weight tackled me from behind. The decanter flew from my hand as I hit the marble floor. I felt the sharp prick of the needle in my shoulder. My muscles turned to lead, and the room began to spin into a dark abyss.
You've lost, Sienna.
Dominic's voice whispered in my ear as he leaned over my collapsing body.
No one believes a lunatic.
Not lost, I wheezed, my vision fading. Just getting started. As the darkness took me, I didn't feel despair. I felt a cold, diamond-hard vow of vengeance. He had the house, the money, and the lies. But he had made one fatal mistake. He let me live. The world returned in jagged, nauseating pieces. A pounding headache, the scent of antiseptic, and the heavy, metallic taste of sedatives. I opened my eyes to find myself in the guest suite of the Thorne Manor. Except the door handles had been removed, and the windows were bolted shut with reinforced steel frames. Finally awake, Sleeping Beauty? I was starting to think the doctor overdid the dosage. I turned my head. Sitting in a velvet armchair was a woman I'd only heard through muffled phone calls. She was young, maybe 25, with bleached blonde hair and a nurse's uniform that was far too tight to be professional. She was filing her nails, looking at me with the bored indifference of someone watching a bug in a jar. "Who the hell are you?" I croaked, my throat feeling like I'd swallowed ground glass. "Amber, your private nurse," she purred, standing up and walking toward the bed. She leaned over me, her sweet floral perfume clashing with the medicinal air.
But between us, I'm the woman who's going to be the next Mrs. Thorne once you're officially declared brain dead or tucked away in a padded cell.
I surged upward, driven by a sudden, violent jolt of adrenaline. I lunged for her throat, but my legs were like jelly. I tumbled off the bed, hitting the hardwood floor with a bone-jarring thud. Amber laughed, a high, shrill sound that set my teeth on edge. "Nice try, honey. But you're on 400 milligrams of Thorazine. You're lucky you can even blink." "I'll kill you," I hissed, clawing at the floor, trying to find my footing. "I'll kill both of you." "With what? Your biting wit?" Amber mocked. She knelt down, grabbing my chin with long acrylic nails that dug into my skin. "Listen to me, Sienna. Dominic is a billionaire. He owns the police, the doctors, and the records. You're just a girl from South Boston who got lucky, and now your luck has run out. Drink your water." She shoved a glass against my lips. I clamped my mouth shut, turning my head away. The water spilled across my face, cold and insulting. "Suit yourself," she shrugged, standing up. "You'll get thirsty eventually. Dominic is downstairs with the lawyers. They're finalizing the temporary transfer of Skylar's trust management to him, citing your unfortunate condition as the reason for his emotional distress." "He's poisoning Skylar," I managed to say, my voice a ragged whisper. "He's using haloperidol to make her hallucinate." Amber froze for a split second, her eyes flickering toward the ceiling corner. I followed her gaze. A smoke detector. But the red light wasn't blinking. It was steady. A hidden camera. "You're babbling, Sienna," Amber said, her voice suddenly loud and performative. "Poor thing, the delusions are getting worse. You think the walls are talking to you now?" She leaned in closer, whispering so softly the mic wouldn't catch it. "He's not just poisoning her, you idiot. He's perfecting the dose. By the time he's done, Skylar won't even remember your name. She'll only remember the screams." Rage, pure, white-hot, and blinding, erased the fog of the drugs. I didn't care about the cameras. I didn't care about the lawyers. I reached out, my hand finding the heavy glass she'd dropped. I didn't swing it at her. I tucked it under the bed frame, shattering it silently against the metal. "You're going to regret coming into this house, Amber," I said, my eyes locking onto hers with a lethal intensity that made her smirk falter. "Dominic doesn't love you. He doesn't love anyone. You're just the next Isabella. Once he's done with me, how long do you think you'll last before you fall down the stairs too?" Amber's face paled for a heartbeat before she masked it with a sneer. "I'm smarter than you, and I'm certainly smarter than her." She turned on her heel and walked out, the heavy lock clicking from the outside. I dragged myself back onto the bed, my heart thundering. I wasn't defeated. I was a Brooks. And in my neighborhood, we didn't wait for a fair fight. We waited for an opening. I reached under the bed and pulled out a long, jagged shard of broken glass. It sliced into my palm, but the pain was a gift. It cleared the last of the Thorazine. I looked at the hidden camera in the smoke detector and smiled. Dominic Thorne wanted a show. I was going to give him a goddamn masterpiece. Years ago, when I first moved in, I'd noticed the floorboards inside were slightly uneven. A common quirk in these old Hamptons estates, where secret passages for servants or Prohibition-era liquor were a staple. I climbed inside the wardrobe, pushing aside the silk dresses that felt like the skin of a former life. I used the glass shard to pry at the corner of the wood. With a gut-wrenching creak, the panel popped. Beneath it wasn't just dust. It was a narrow, steep spiral staircase leading into the black maw of the house's foundation. I descended, my bare feet flinching against the ice-cold stone. The air grew thick with the smell of damp earth and old rot. At the bottom, I found myself in a small, windowless room, the original cellar. My flashlight, a small pen light I'd hidden in my silk robe weeks ago, flickered to life. The beam cut through the dark, landing on a stack of dusty crates. And there, tucked behind a loose brick in the corner, was a leather-bound book. "Isabella," I whispered, the name tasting like a warning. I opened the diary. The early entries were filled with the same fairy tale bullshit I'd been fed. But the final pages, they were a descent into hell. May 12, 2021. He's changing the milk again. Skylar won't stop crying. She looks at me like I'm a ghost. He told the gardener I've been drinking. I haven't touched a drop. He's building a case, piece by piece. If I don't make it out, the truth is behind the sunflower painting in the study. The real deed, the real will. My breath hitched. The bastard didn't just kill her. He'd been using the exact same playbook on me. A carbon copy of murder. Suddenly, the floorboards above me groaned. "Sienna? Darling, I know you're awake. I can see the empty bed on my monitor." Dominic's voice echoed down the stairs, cold and conversational, as if he were calling me for dinner. I scrambled back, clutching Isabella's diary to my chest. I couldn't go back up. If he found me here, with this evidence, I was a dead woman. I looked around frantically. In the corner of the cellar was an old laundry chute, narrow, rusted, and leading straight back to the service hall near the kitchen. "I know you found the passage, Sienna." Dominic's footsteps thudded on the spiral stairs, slow and deliberate. Isabella found it too. She thought she was so clever, hiding her little notes. Do you want to know what her last words were before I pushed her? She begged for you, not for her life, but for the woman she knew would eventually take her place. She felt sorry for you. "You're a sociopath, Dominic!" I yelled, my voice echoing off the stone walls. I didn't hide anymore. The fury was a physical weight in my limbs. "You killed the mother of your child for a bank account."
I killed a nuisance for an empire, he corrected, his shadow appearing on the wall at the turn of the stairs. He was holding a heavy iron poker from the fireplace. And now, I'm going to clean up the rest of the mess. I didn't wait. I lunged for the laundry chute, sliding into the darkness just as the iron poker slammed into the stone where my head had been a second before. I tumbled down the metal tunnel, skin tearing, heart screaming. I landed in a pile of damp linens in the service pantry. I didn't stop to breathe. I scrambled out, Isabella's diary tucked into my waistband. The kitchen was dark. I grabbed a chef's knife from the magnetic rack. 10 inches of high carbon steel. Come and get me, you son of a bitch, I hissed into the shadows. I'm not begging, I'm hunting. A beam of a high-powered flashlight cut through the darkness, sweeping over the stainless steel appliances. I pressed my back against the cold wall, holding my breath. You have Isabella's little book, don't you? Dominic's silhouette appeared in the doorway. He wasn't wearing his suit jacket anymore. His white shirt was unbuttoned at the collar, sleeves rolled up. He looked like a man ready for manual labor. It's all lies, you know. The ramblings of a woman who couldn't handle the pressure of being a thorn. She handled you just fine until you murdered her, I retorted, my voice steady despite the hammer of my heart. The world doesn't care about the truth, Sienna. They care about the headline. He stepped into the kitchen, the flashlight beam bouncing off the knife in my hand. He stopped, a cruel smirk tugging at his lips. A knife? Really, darling? You're going to make this so easy for the police. Hysterical wife attacks loving husband in a fit of drug-induced rage. I won't even have to lie. You won't have to lie because you'll be too busy bleeding out. I snapped. I didn't wait for him to move. I kicked a heavy bar stool toward his shins and lunged. I wasn't aiming for a warning. I went for his throat. Dominic was fast. He swung the iron poker, parrying my blade with a violent clang that sent vibrations up my arm. He shoved me back, his strength overwhelming. I hit the kitchen island, the marble edge digging into my spine. Is that all you've got? He hissed, stepping closer. Suddenly, a small, muffled sob came from the doorway. We both froze. Skylar stood there, clutching her headless bear, her eyes wide with a terror that wasn't rehearsed this time. She saw the knife. She saw the iron poker. She saw the mask of the perfect father slipping off her father's face. Daddy? She whispered, her voice trembling. Go back to bed, Skylar. Dominic barked, his voice sharp enough to draw blood. Maya, Skylar, run! I yelled, trying to scramble up. In that split second of distraction, I didn't go for Dominic. I went for the one thing he didn't expect. I dived for his feet, tackling him with every ounce of weight I had. We went down in a heap of limbs and fury. The flashlight spun across the floor, illuminating the ceiling in wild arcs. I felt his fingers clawing at my face, trying to find my eyes. I bit down on his hand, tasting the salt of his skin and the copper of his blood. He roared in pain, and for the first time, I saw it. Real, raw fear in his eyes. Mrs. Gable! Amber, get down here! Dominic screamed. I scrambled away, grabbing the flashlight and Isabella's diary. I didn't head for the front door. I knew it was dead-bolted. I headed for the basement stairs, the deep basement where the heavy-duty circuit breakers were. You can't hide forever, Sienna, Dominic yelled, his footsteps heavy behind me. I'm done hiding, I whispered to the darkness. I reached the breaker room and slammed the heavy iron lever down. Clunk.
The entire Thorn Manor plunged into total, suffocating blackness. No security cameras, no electronic locks, no lights. "Now," I hissed, my eyes adjusting to the dark, the knife held low. "Let's see how well you manage your assets when you can't see them coming." The darkness was absolute, a thick velvet shroud that smelled of ozone and old dust. My breathing slowed, becoming a rhythmic, shallow hiss. In the silence, my other senses sharpened. I could hear the house groaning under the assault of the Atlantic wind and the frantic, heavy footfalls of Dominic somewhere in the kitchen above. "Sienna, you think cutting the power changes anything?" His voice was jagged now, the smooth, billionaire facade stripped away. "I know this house better than you ever will." "You know the blueprints, Dominic," I whispered into the dark, moving toward the service stairs. "But I know the shadows." I reached the top of the stairs, my knife leading the way. Suddenly, the emergency lights flickered. Not the main power, but the dim red glow of the backup generators. It bathed the hallway in a bloody hue. "There you are!" I spun around. It wasn't Dominic. It was Amber. The nurse stood at the end of the hall, her blonde hair disheveled, her eyes wide with a manic, desperate light. She wasn't holding a sedative this time. She was holding a surgical scalpel she'd stolen from the doctor's kit. "You've ruined everything, you psycho bitch!" Amber shrieked, lunging at me. "Dominic was going to buy me that penthouse in Mayfair. I was going to be someone." "You were going to be a corpse, Amber," I countered, sidestepping her clumsy thrust. I grabbed her wrist, twisting it until I heard a satisfying pop. "He killed Isabella. He's poisoning his daughter. What makes you think you're special?" "Because I'm willing to do what he can't," she spat, kicking out at my knees. We crashed into the wall, a tangle of limbs and sharp edges. She was younger and faster, but I was fueled by a cold, righteous fury that made me feel invincible. I slammed my forehead into her nose, feeling the cartilage break. As she gasped, clutching her face, I pinned her against the mahogany paneling. "Where is the doctor?" I hissed, the edge of my chef's knife pressing into the soft skin beneath her chin. "Gone," she wheezed, blood leaking between her fingers. "He saw the knife. He saw you tackle Dominic. He ran. He's not a murderer, Sienna. Just a greedy coward." "And you? Which one are you?" "I'm a survivor," she yelled, trying to bring the scalpel up again. I didn't hesitate. I drove my knee into her stomach, knocking the wind out of her, and slammed her head against the wall one last time. She crumpled into a heap on the carpet, unconscious. I snatched the scalpel from her limp hand, a second blade for the collection. "Sienna!" Dominic's voice was closer now. He was in the foyer, right below me. "I have Skylar!" he shouted. "And I have the iron poker. Come down here and face me, or I swear to God, I'll give the police a reason to arrest you for child endangerment." My blood ran cold. I knew him. He wouldn't kill her. Not yet. But he would scare her, bruise her, do anything to maintain his control. I looked at Isabella's diary tucked in my waistband, then at the 2 blades in my hands. I wasn't the scared architect from Manhattan anymore. I was the storm. "I'm coming, Dominic!" I roared, my voice echoing through the blood-red halls. "But I'm not coming to talk!" I sprinted toward the balcony overlooking the foyer. I saw him standing near the grand entrance, holding a sobbing Skylar by the arm. He looked up, his face twisted in a monstrous grin as the red emergency lights glinted off the iron in his hand. That's a good girl, he mocked. Come to Daddy. I didn't take the stairs. I vaulted over the railing, a screaming shadow descending from the dark, aiming straight for the heart of the man who had turned my life into a graveyard. I don't beg, I whispered, wiping the blood from my lip. I looked past him. In the shadows of the dining room, I saw Mrs. Gable. She was standing there, holding a heavy silver candelabra, her face a mask of paralyzed terror. Mrs. Gable, I shouted. The sunflower painting. The study. The air rushed past me, a cold whistle in my ears. I didn't land on my feet. I landed like a mountain lion, my weight slamming into Dominic's shoulders before he could swing that iron rod. We hit the marble floor of the foyer with a bone-crushing impact. Run, Skylar! To the gate! Don't look back! I screamed, the breath knocked out of me. Skylar didn't hesitate. Driven by pure survival instinct, she bolted toward the service entrance, her tiny footsteps disappearing into the shadows. Dominic let out a guttural roar, his fingers clawing at my throat. You meddling bitch! He shoved me off with a strength born of desperation. We both scrambled to our feet, circling each other in the crimson glow of the backup lights. He was bleeding from a gash on his forehead, his white shirt shredded. In his hand, he still gripped the iron poker. In mine, the chef's knife. Look at you, Dominic hissed, spitting blood onto the marble. The refined Sienna Brooks, reduced to a common gutter rat. This is your true nature, isn't it? Violence. Madness. It's not madness to put down a rabid dog, Dominic, I retorted, my voice steady, my eyes locked on his. You killed Isabella. You drugged your daughter. You thought money made you a god, but you're just a parasite in a fancy suit. Money does make me a god, he shrieked, lunging forward. The iron poker whistled through the air. I dodged, the metal missing my skull by an inch and shattering a marble pedestal behind me. I countered with a slash, my blade catching his forearm. He didn't even flinch. He was too far gone, fueled by a narcissistic rage that knew no pain. I built this empire, he yelled, swinging again. I won't let a nobody like you tear it down because of a few dead women. A nobody? I laughed, a cold, jagged sound. I sidestepped his next move and drove the hilt of my knife into his kidney. I'm the woman who's going to watch you rot. We moved in a lethal dance. Clang, slash, thud. He caught me with a backhand that sent me spinning into the grand piano. The keys let out a discordant, mournful wail. My vision blurred, the taste of copper filling my mouth. Isabella begged, you know, Dominic said, walking toward me, the iron poker dragging on the floor with a terrifying screech. I wonder, who will you beg for? Get the documents, now! Dominic froze. His head snapped toward the study. For the first time, a flicker of genuine panic crossed his face. That was his weakness, the paper trail Isabella had hidden. Stay away from there, you old hag, Dominic roared, turning his back on me to charge toward the housekeeper. It was the only opening I needed. I didn't use the knife. I lunged forward, grabbing the heavy velvet curtain cord. I looped it, swung, and tackled him from behind, wrapping the cord around his throat in a lightning-fast motion. Dominic thrashed, the iron poker clattering to the floor. He clawed at the cord, his face turning a horrific shade of purple under the red lights. This is for Isabella, I hissed into his ear, tightening the grip with every ounce of my South Boston soul. He fell to his knees, his strength failing. Suddenly, the front doors burst open. Police! Drop the weapon! Blinding white tactical lights flooded the foyer. I didn't let go. Not yet.
I wanted him to feel the darkness closing in. "Sienna, let him go!" It was Marcus Vance, Isabella's brother, flanked by officers. I slowly loosened the cord. Dominic slumped to the floor, gasping for air. "He killed her, Marcus," I said, my voice cracking. "I have the diary. I have the proof." Dominic looked up, still trying to play the part. "Help! She's insane! She attacked us!" Marcus walked over, his face a mask of cold fury. "We know, Sienna. The security guards sent us the cloud footage before Dominic could wipe it. We saw everything." As they dragged Dominic toward the door in handcuffs, he turned his head, his eyes full of venom. "You think this is over? I have lawyers. I'll be out before the sun rises." "Not this time, Dominic," I said, holding up Isabella's diary. "Because you forgot that I'm much, much better at architecture than you are. I've already mapped out your new home. It's 6 by 8 and it has bars." The Hampton sun rose over the Atlantic, but for the first time in months, the light didn't feel like a spotlight on a crime scene. It felt like a cleansing fire. I stood on the obsidian black balcony of the Thorne Manor, watching the final forensics van pull away. The silence of the house was no longer heavy with secrets. It was just empty. Dominic was currently being processed at the Suffolk County Jail on charges of first-degree murder, child endangerment, and aggravated assault. The doctor and Amber had already started singing to the district attorney, trading stories for a lighter sentence. "Sienna?" I turned. Marcus Vance was standing in the doorway, holding a manila folder. Behind him, Skylar was sitting on the floor of the foyer, coloring with a box of crayons Mrs. Gable had found. The child was quiet, but she wasn't screaming. The high-frequency transmitters had been ripped out of the walls and crushed under my boot hours ago. "The DNA results from the cellar floor came back on a rush order," Marcus said, his voice thick with a decade of grief finally finding a home. "It's Isabella. He didn't just kill her. He kept her close to the money he stole from her. You were right about everything." I leaned against the railing, feeling the salt spray on my face. "I wasn't right, Marcus. I was just the only one left who was angry enough to notice." He handed me the folder. "The trust is secure. Under the terms of Isabella's real will, the one you found behind the sunflower painting, Dominic is completely disinherited due to his criminal acts. As the surviving spouse not involved in the crime, and with my backing, the court has granted you temporary guardianship of Skylar and the estate." I looked down at the $250 million empire. To Dominic, this was a godhead. To me, it was a graveyard that needed to be turned into a garden. "I don't want the house, Marcus," I said, my voice cold and certain. "I want it razed. I want every brick of this prison ground into dust. We'll build a sanctuary here, a place for women and children who have been told they're hysterical when they were actually just being hunted." "And Skylar?" Marcus asked softly. I looked down at the little girl. She looked up and, for the first time, she didn't recoil. She saw the bandages on my hands, the bruise on my jaw, and the steel in my eyes. She didn't see a mean mommy. She saw a survivor. I walked down the grand staircase, my footsteps echoing with a new kind of authority. I knelt beside her, ignoring the ache in my ribs. "Hey, Sky," I whispered. She held up a drawing. It was a mess of yellow and blue, a sun rising over a house that didn't have any locks on the doors. "Is the bad man gone?" she asked, her voice a tiny, fragile thread. "He's never coming back," I promised, taking her small hand in mine. "From now on, nobody tells us what to think. Nobody tells us what to feel. We're the ones who write the story now." 2 weeks later, I stood at the edge of the cliff. The Thorn Manor was a skeleton of wood and stone, the demolition crews working with a rhythmic, satisfying roar. Dominic's lead attorney had tried to visit me twice, offering a settlement for wrongful imprisonment if I'd just softened my testimony. I'd sent him back with a copy of Isabella's diary and a message. I'm from South Boston. We don't settle, we finish things. I felt a tug on my coat. Skylar stood beside me, wearing a bright red sweater. She looked at the crumbling mansion, then up at me. Where are we going, Sienna? I picked her up, settling her on my hip. I looked away from the ruins and toward the open horizon, where the New York skyline shimmered in the distance. I had a new firm to start, a legacy to protect, and a life to live that didn't involve looking over my shoulder. Wherever we want, I said, a slow, triumphant smile finally breaking across my face. The world is a lot bigger than this house, kiddo. Let's go see it. I turned my back on the dust of the Thorn Empire and walked toward the car. The predator was in a cage. The prey had found its teeth, and for the first time in my life, the silence felt exactly like freedom. The courtroom was a vacuum of silence, the air thick with the scent of old wood and the crushing weight of impending judgment. I sat in the front row, my back as straight as a steel beam. I wasn't wearing the soft pastels Dominic used to pick out for me. I was dressed in a sharp obsidian black suit, the armor of a woman who had walked through hell and come out holding the keys. Across the aisle, Dominic Thorne looked like a ghost of the man he used to be. The orange jumpsuit clashed violently with his ego. Without his $5,000 suits and his army of fixers, he was just a small, aging man with a hollow stare. The court calls Sienna Brooks to the stand, the bailiff announced. I stood up. Every eye in the room followed me. The press gallery was a sea of camera lenses, all hungry for a glimpse of the madwife, who had turned out to be the smartest person in the room. I walked to the stand, placed my hand on the Bible, and looked Dominic straight in the eyes. He flinched. Ms. Brooks, the district attorney began. The defense claims that the events at the Thorn Manor were a result of a mutual domestic dispute fueled by your mental instability. How do you respond? I leaned into the microphone. My voice didn't tremble. It was a cold, rhythmic pulse. Dominic Thorne didn't marry me for love. He married me because he needed a replacement for the woman he murdered, a new vessel to blame for his own rot. He used high-frequency sound waves to torture a 3-year-old child and chemical sedatives to silence me. That isn't a dispute. That is a calculated, predatory campaign of terror. And the diary? Isabella's voice from the grave, I said, holding the gaze of the jury. She told me where the bodies were buried. Literally, she warned me that Dominic's greatest weapon wasn't his money, but the world's willingness to believe a powerful man over a hysterical woman. Dominic's lead lawyer jumped up. Objection! Speculation! Overruled! The judge snapped, her eyes fixed on me with a grim respect. For 3 hours, I dismantled him. I laid out the architectural modifications he'd made to the house to facilitate his gaslighting, the hidden vents, the bypass security logs, the secret room in the cellar. I wasn't just a witness. I was the architect who had decoded his blueprint of evil. As I stepped down, I passed Dominic's table. He leaned in, his voice a desperate, poisonous hiss. You think you've won, Sienna? You're nothing without my name. You're just a girl from the slums playing dress-up. I stopped and looked down at him. I didn't feel anger anymore. I felt a profound, chilling pity. I was a girl from the slums when I took you down in the dark, Dominic. Imagine what I'll do now that I have the light. The jury didn't even need 2 hours. On the count of first-degree murder, guilty. On the count of child endangerment, guilty. On the count of aggravated assault and kidnapping, guilty. The courtroom erupted. Dominic collapsed into his chair, the reality of a life sentence finally shattering his mask. As the officers moved in to lead him away, I stood up and walked out the double doors, never looking back. Outside, the New York air was crisp and biting. Marcus was waiting by the car, Skylar holding his hand. She was wearing a small backpack, ready for the flight to Boston, to my home, where she'd grow up surrounded by brothers who would teach her how to fight, and a family that would never let her be silenced. "Is it over?" Marcus asked, his eyes wet with the relief of a decade-old debt paid in full. "No," I said, looking at the city skyline, my mind already sketching the plans for the sanctuary. "The trial is over. The justice is done. But for me and Skylar, this is just the first page of a much better book." I took Skylar's hand, and as we walked away from the courthouse, the sound of the city felt like a symphony. I had been the victim, the prisoner, and the prey. But as the sun hit the glass towers of Manhattan, I knew exactly who I was. I was Sienna Brooks, and I was the only architect who knew how to build a life out of ruins. The demolition of Thorne Manor wasn't just a construction project. It was an exorcism. I stood at the edge of the cliff, the wind whipping my hair across my face as the massive iron wrecking ball swung through the air. With a thunderous crack, it smashed into the master bedroom, the place where Dominic had whispered his most venomous lies. Dust and splinters of expensive white oak exploded into the sky, falling like gray snow into the churning Atlantic below. "Symbolic, isn't it?" Marcus Vance said, stepping up beside me. He handed me a thermal cup of coffee. "Most people would have sold this place for $50 million and moved on. You're spending $2 million just to turn it into a hole in the ground." "Some foundations are too poisoned to build on, Marcus," I replied, watching a second blow take out the grand staircase. "I don't want a single stone of his legacy left standing. Not for me, and especially not for Skylar." I pulled a crumpled piece of paper from my pocket. It was a letter that had arrived this morning from Sing Sing Correctional Facility. It didn't have a return name, just a prisoner number I had memorized against my will. "I still see you in the dark, Sienna," it read in Dominic's elegant, arrogant script. "Every brick of that house belongs to me. You're just a squatter in a ghost story. I'll be seeing you soon." I didn't flinch. I didn't even feel the old spark of fear. I walked over to the portable fire pit the workers used for warmth and tossed the letter in. I watched the edges curl and blacken until Dominic's threats were nothing but ash. "The board of directors at Thorne Industries officially voted to rebrand this morning," Marcus continued, oblivious to the letter I'd just burned. "They're calling it Vance Brooks Tech. They want you to take a seat on the board, Sienna. They saw the way you handled the press during the trial. They know you're the one with the spine." I looked at him, a sharp, knowing smile playing on my lips. "I'm an architect, Marcus. I build things. I don't sit in boardrooms and argue over profit margins, but I'll take the seat on one condition. 50% of the annual dividends go directly to the Isabella Foundation." "Done," he said without hesitation. "She would have loved you, you know. My sister was a fighter, but she didn't have your edge." "She gave me the edge," I whispered. "She gave me the diary. She was the one who fought from the grave." A small shout of laughter echoed from the nearby garden, which had been cordoned off from the construction. Skylar was chasing a golden retriever puppy, the first thing I'd bought after we moved into the temporary beach house. She was wearing a bright yellow raincoat, a vivid splash of color against the gray morning. She looked healthy. She looked loud. I realized then that the silence I had feared in this house was finally gone. It was replaced by the roar of machinery and the sound of a child who was no longer afraid to breathe. "Sienna, look!" Skylar ran over, pointing at the house. The final wall, the one with the grand fireplace, toppled over with a bone-shaking roar. The Thorn name was officially erased from the coastline. "It's gone, Sky," I said, lifting her up. "The big, scary house is gone." "Are we going home now?" she asked, tucking her head into the crook of my neck. "Yeah," I said, looking one last time at the empty cliffside where the sanctuary would soon rise. "We're going home." As we walked toward the car, I felt the weight of the last year finally lift. Dominic was a ghost in a cage, and I was the woman who had burned his world to the ground. I wasn't just a survivor anymore. I was the one who drew the lines, and this time, the lines led exactly where I wanted them to go. The cliffs of the Hamptons no longer groaned under the weight of a dark empire. Instead, they breathed. 6 months after the fall of Dominic Thorne, the Isabella Sanctuary stood in the Manor's place. It was a masterpiece of cedar, glass, and light. Designed not to cage people in, but to let the outside world back in. No hidden rooms, no electronic locks, and no secrets. I stood on the balcony, the salt air stinging my cheeks. I wasn't wearing the designer masks Dominic had bought for me. I wore a simple work coat, the armor of a woman who had finally built something of her own. "The first residents arrive tomorrow," Mrs. Gable said, stepping up beside me. She looked younger now, the shadow of fear finally gone from her eyes. "The nursery is ready." Skylar picked out the books herself. I smiled. Skylar was in Boston now, thriving in a world that didn't vibrate with high-frequency terror. She was learning that her voice was a weapon of joy, not a trigger for pain. A car pulled up the gravel drive, and Marcus Vance stepped out. He looked up at the structure, then at me. "I just came from the state penitentiary," Marcus said, joining me at the railing. "Dominic is struggling. He spends his days drawing floor plans on his cell walls. He's obsessed with how you did it, how a nobody stripped him of his name, his money, and his freedom." "He underestimated the foundation," I replied. "He thought I was part of the furniture. He forgot that architects know exactly where the load-bearing walls are. I didn't just leave. I pulled the whole house down on top of him." Marcus handed me a small evidence bag. Inside was a charred Queen of Spades, a pathetic parting gift from a man who still thought life was a game. I didn't even open the bag. I tossed it over the railing, watching the wind catch it and drag it down into the churning Atlantic surf. It disappeared into the white foam, forgotten. "What's next, Sienna?" Marcus asked. "The house is gone. The villain is in a cage. What's left?" I looked at the blueprints tucked under my arm, designs for 3 more sanctuaries across the East Coast. I thought of my new firm in Manhattan, staffed by those the world had tried to silence. "Next?" I said, a slow, triumphant smile breaking across my face. "I spent my life building walls to keep people out. From now on, I'm building bridges to bring them back." I walked toward the entrance of the sanctuary, my footsteps steady on the stone. The name Thorne was a footnote in a court transcript, but Sienna Brooks was written in the glass, and the lives of every woman who would find peace here. The story didn't end with a wedding or a funeral. It ended with a blueprint, and for the first time, the lines were perfect. Never let anyone use love to control you. If it's toxic, tear it down and start over. You own your life, nobody else. Thanks for watching Sienna's journey. If you enjoyed it, please like, comment, and follow for more stories. See you in the next one.